from Minnesota and North Dakota. So far at COP, it's been amazing. I've been both in the blue zone. I'm here as a delegate with Climate Generation in the U.S. ACE delegation, which is Action for Climate Empowerment. So I have a badge and I'm a delegate to the conference as an observer. So I got to be inside and see amazing conversations happening inside. But really all of the best moments so far have been sitting with folks at tables, meeting people from around the world, marching. I was part of the march that happened on Saturday, and it was gigantic. There was like 150,000 people in the streets, and I was at the very front of the march with a global coalition of Indigenous people from all around the world. So there is representation here from so many different folks, and really Indigenous people bringing attention to the idea that a lot of the current climate goals really forget Indigenous people and sacrifice Indigenous people, especially in the global South and in the Pacific. So far COP has been amazing in that way. And I just want to touch on the focus here, which is how should Minnesota goals relate to these global goals? And in my work with 100% campaign, what we do a lot of is, working towards a 100% clean energy, just and sustainable future for Minnesota. And here at COP, the thing I've been most inspired by, and what I try to highlight in my work with 100%, is really making sure that we're laying out a vision for the future that is exciting, that is inspiring, because we know from data and from a lot of research that when you actually overwhelm people with the science of the climate crisis, it paralyzes people with fear. So at 100%, we really try to lead by using arts and culture with our policy work to make sure that people feel like there is a possibility for a climate future that is going to be better than what we're currently living in, right? We don't have to accept a dystopian vision for this future. And that is really what Indigenous people here at COP are articulating, is that because we have ancestral knowledge of what it is like to live in a world outside of capitalism and to live in a just and sustainable way on this planet, in interdependence with other living things on the earth, we believe that Indigenous people have the roadmap that we need to follow in order to get to a future where we can all survive. If we want to make the goals that COP has, which is to keep warming to 2 degrees or even to 1.5 degrees, we have to reject letting corporations and global capitalists decide what these goals are for us. So Indigenous people are here at COP to really say we don't want any false solutions, that net zero sacrifices too many people around the globe, especially the most marginalized communities, Indigenous communities, Black communities, disabled folks. We all deserve a just climate future. So that's what we are here. And I'm so happy to be part of this. I'm very thankful to Climate Generation and to 100% for helping me be here, because Minnesota needs this. And the world needs Minnesota to be the kind of climate leader we should be. We should be giving people the blueprints on how to do this at all levels of government, with our state government, with great representatives like Representative Hornstein and Representative Acomb leading the way. We can chart a course together with Minnesota's Indigenous people on how to have that fossil-free future and to make real climate goals that give people hope. So thank you so much for listening to me. And I'm not going to be able to stay for questions because I'm kind of in the middle of this the People's Climate Summit. But if reporters would like to ask me questions, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is ZII, B as in boy, NG, or the 100% campaign Twitter, whatever. DM me, I'll answer anything. But thank you all so much for this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Ellen, do you want to speak next?
Sure. Can you hear me all right? Yes. Hopefully you can hear me. Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Anderson, and it's a pleasure to see you today. We are so delighted to be here at the COP26. It's a real privilege for us to be here on behalf of the people of Minnesota. And I like to think, sort of start with a little context going backwards in time. In Minnesota, back in 2007, we really found a bipartisan consensus and came together on climate and said we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions aggressively. And we did it in a way that followed the science and followed exactly what was going on at the different COPs with the UN over time. And so we did it then. We need to figure out how to do it again, and that's where our lawmakers will come in. And what I'll say is one of the amazing takeaways I've gotten just this is our first day actually in the COP building in the blue zone. We have found so many people that we've met from around the world that we get a feeling that we're all in this together, and that's what everyone is feeling, a sense of urgency as well as a sense of camaraderie and a shared mission that we all face and a shared future that we all face. And I have to point out that a number of people have said, Minnesota, Minneapolis, oh yeah, we know all about you. The world knows who we are in Minnesota right now, and not necessarily all for good reasons. From the past year, we are famous. And I think this really tells a story. People say, how are things going in Minnesota? And I think we have an opportunity to make the story of Minnesota be that we are the leader in the Midwest on getting towards the climate solutions that are equitable and doable. And we need to do those as soon as possible. And I think that's the message we want to bring to Minnesotans. So with that, I'll turn it over to our state legislators.
Hi, everybody. I'm Representative Patty Acomb. I represent House District 44B, and I'm in my second term in the legislature. As was said earlier, I chair the House Climate Action Caucus. And as Ellen was talking about, you know, years ago, we set some standards and some greenhouse gas emission goals, and we need to update them. And a bill that I authored last year in the House and that we passed in the House is the Next Generation Climate Act, and it's updating the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And we really need to do that because that's what's happening around the world. That's what they're doing. It's what the science tells us that we need to do, and that's what they're doing. And hopefully setting here, have already set for the IPCC. And so Minnesota needs to catch up at this point. We were a leader, and now it's time for us to catch up. And so as Ashley alluded to before, there's some really amazing things that are happening here within the COP walls. And so there's representatives from all over the world. And it is so inspiring to hear their stories and to learn from them. And then there's this whole other experience that's happening outside these walls. And since I've been here, I flew in on Thursday. There's been several marches and rallies, and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people are taking to the streets because this issue is so important to them. And so, you know, just as it's important to those of us in Minnesota, and so this passion and this enthusiasm that they're bringing to this advocacy is really helpful to help push us as legislators and frankly hold us accountable. And so I'm really inspired after being here and witnessing this and being a part of it to go home and, you know, kind of double down on efforts to really address the climate change or the climate crisis. And it's going to take all of us working together in order for that to happen. And so we need to come up with solutions that include everybody. And so that's what I want to work on this next session, is really things that we all can work on together. And so with that, maybe I'll turn it over to Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Representative Acomb, and good afternoon from Glasgow. Good morning to all of you in Minnesota. I'm State Representative Frank Hornstein. I chair the Transportation, Finance, and Policy Committee in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and I represent a district in Minneapolis, parts of downtown and southwest Minneapolis. I want to echo what everyone has said so far. I think this climate conference, this UN climate conference here in Scotland, really necessitates, it really brings home, drives home that we all have to be global citizens in this moment. The United States is still historically the largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. China is, of course, the fastest growing emitter. But we have a responsibility to the rest of the world. And there's two issues really being talked about a lot as I've gone through the halls here. This is my first day inside the conference, like Representative Acomb, I flew in late last week and spent a lot of time marching and in the streets and meeting people from all over the world, which has been very, very energizing and inspiring, particularly youth from all over the world that are playing a key role. But there's really a couple of issues that are on the table here. Are we going to fulfill the commitments, the historic commitments made in Paris 6 years ago to lower greenhouse gas emissions to 1.5 degrees Celsius? That's something we need to look for here in the coming days. Will we leave Glasgow with that commitment and that agreement and a plan? Secondly, there's a lot of discussion about the responsibility of the global north, the industrialized countries that are the primary emitters of greenhouse gas emissions, and what kind of reparations and what kind of justice can be expected of us. And then finally, I think it's absolutely critical that we continue to engage primarily with our youth, but really this is a multi-generational effort here in Scotland. I've been, again, there was a youth march on Friday. Youth were very heavily represented in that march. Over 100,000 people from all over the world participated in it Saturday. That message from the streets is what the leaders inside the COP need to be listening to. And I'm happy to be a part of this. And I'll just conclude by saying that as chair of the Transportation Committee, we'll be redoubling our efforts to address the emissions from transportation in particular, which are now the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota, and a growing, if not largest source around the world. There was a couple of forums that MnDOT and transportation leaders in Minnesota are participating in. So I'm happy to answer questions. It's been a great few days, and we look forward to continuing to participate as Minnesotans.
Thank you to all of you for your remarks. I don't see any questions in the chat box so far. Does anyone have any questions? Any reporters on the line can feel free to just raise your hand. I'll unmute you if you're interested in asking a question. Oh, hang on. I see someone here. I'm going to try to unmute you. Well, while I work on that, it looks like we have a question in chat. Looks like this is directed to our lawmakers. How can legislators redirect infrastructure bill funding to reducing transportation emissions? Anyone want to jump in and take that?
I'm the chair of the committee, but I'm I think Senator Anderson and Representative Aiko also may want to chime in as well. Look, we are very pleased at the passage of this historic bill. And I think there is very strong provisions for transportation and climate. And so I think we're going to be looking at what options, what monies are available to the state, what's been granted to the state, what are the parameters of those funds. But I really look towards reducing emissions through increased investments in public transportation, alternatives to driving, biking, walking. We need to reduce our vehicle miles traveled. That's really what will drive down emissions the fastest in the transportation sector. Also, there are provisions for electrification of our transportation system, private automobiles, also electric buses. That's very, very important for driving down emissions. So this is a really key strategy that we have, the three things I named. And the fact of the matter is our federal bill will have some money for Minnesota, but we're going to pour over that bill. We were going to be ready when the legislature starts in January, at the end of January, January 31st to be exact, with some ideas, not new ideas, but I think ideas that can be funded potentially now that this bill has passed.
And then if I may add to that, I think that when we look at climate change, we know there's greenhouse gas emissions and that we need to reduce those, but we also know that our climate is already changing. And so we have to be building infrastructure to be adaptive and sustainable. And so we need to be using that to ensure that, or I guess we need to be looking at the projects we invest in, that they are not making our environments worse. And so if there's flooding issues or stormwater issues, so we need to be looking at mitigation and adaptation and being sure that the investments that we make are improving the situation for Minnesotans.
Thank you for the question.
Dan Crocker from NPR, it looks like you've got a question.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Very well.
Yes.
Hey guys, thanks for doing this. And there's a question in the chat that gets at what I wanted to ask as well. Could legislators and NGOs both comment on what more specifically what you see as your role at COP and about what impact you can have? I mean, you've all talked about how inspiring it's been taking part in the marches, networking with folks from around the world. But talk about do you all feel like you can have a real impact on decisions that are made for commitments from actual countries and nations moving forward from this?
So I can start with that. I'll jump in. So I think, we have our goals here are, number one, to spread information widely to people around the world about the Midwest and the role that we play. Because, if you were to look at the Midwest as a country, we would be seen as the 6th biggest emitter in the world, which you might have been hearing that data point a lot this week. And so we have a big job ahead of us, but what we do can really make or break what the United States does as a whole. And what we're finding here, of course, is how we're all aligned together, that we're all on the same path. And so part of it is we want to spread information about, our successes and about things that we've learned from that, we want to do better. And so we're doing that by having different panels and discussions and lots of conversations with many people. So we're sharing our story. And then just as important, and it's why it's so great that you're here, is we want Minnesotans to know that, we want to convey what's happening around the world and how we play such an important role in it. That we're all in this together, and that there's so much goodwill within these, despite the skepticism, despite the blah, blah, blah problems that we're having where people are skeptical that we're going to get as far as we need to. There's still this overarching feeling that we have to work together for all of us to have a successful and healthy future. So that is essential. And I just want Minnesotans to feel part of that. And we're lucky we have a really strong Minnesota delegation. We have some visitors back here with us from Minnesota joining us.
I see some questions. Did you have any follow-up there, Dan?
Did the legislators want to weigh in at all on what they see their role being there?
Well, I think our role is twofold. One is to certainly bring back the interpretation and action that has taken place here and underscore the United States in general, but Minnesota in particular's responsibility globally. I think that is huge. And so our responsibility globally means that Minnesota has to live up to the goals that we ourselves have established over many years. We have fallen short. And so, we need to have a much more robust response. Again, look, Senator Anderson was the chief author of the Renewable Energy Standard in 2007. That was nation leading. And I think we have several nation leading initiatives that Minnesota can be proud of. But we've also fallen short, and we have to really address those areas, and we're going to continue to push legislatively our 100% bill. Just because all of its provisions weren't adopted last year doesn't mean we're going to keep fighting for that. We're going to keep fighting for a strong public transportation system and electric vehicle infrastructure, and and other activities that can reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. But I hope to convey the sense of urgency that people are feeling. the headlines of the Scottish Sunday newspapers that I saw yesterday have been quoting a lot John Kerry's quote that COP26, what is happening in these coming days, is really our last best hope. And that has been echoed by many people here. And so, so it's our job to interpret that, to bring it back, to take action locally, and to make sure that we're part of a global community.
And I don't really have a whole lot to add other than to say, you know, there are so many Minnesotans that are here participating in COP. And I think that really just speaks to how important Minnesotans feel this issue is. And so, you know, what do we need to do and what can we take home? I look at, I come to this this place with all these people working on this issue, looking for ways to help people understand. We're the only state in the country that has divided government. And so there may be things that, you know, we can pass in the House that have a harder time in the Senate. And so how are other organizations, how other people in other countries working together to come to compromise, to get things passed that we all know need to pass. And so, you know, I'm looking for ways and talking to people that I meet and asking them about their experiences. How did you bring people along? How did you get them to buy in? And so I think it's really learning from others and sharing our successes with others as well.
Can I have one more little comment just to piggyback on yours, that I think it's been really amazing to hear from people from around the world that are here, that we are here to talk about not whether climate change is real or if there's been, or about political divides. Everyone here is like so over that, and we need to be so over that. We need to move on because people here are focused on how can we work together to build a future that's good for everyone around the world. And I would just really love to see Minnesota take on that challenge. How can we be part of a global solution that makes our future better for ourselves and our future generations, with Minnesota in a way that aligns with the goals that everyone has together?
There's a couple of questions in the chat about line 3. I know that there is a line 3 panel that's happening from COP, I believe on Wednesday. Someone's asking who will all be involved in that. I believe Ellen Anderson will be. I'm not sure about the lawmakers present. And then also from your perspectives, can anything be done about line 3 at this point?
Well, I can start briefly. Yeah, there'll be a panel tomorrow, which is at the crack of dawn, Minnesota time. So you'll be able to see the panel discussion tomorrow afternoon, I think. Yeah. Live streamed or, you know, hosted. Tape delayed live. And I'll be on the panel talking about the legal challenges and all the lawsuits that, you know, sort of the legal approach to fighting line 3. And there'll be several Indigenous leaders. Ashley Fairbanks will join us for that and lead that discussion, and some others from Minnesota, a number of experts from Minnesota, Interfaith Power and Light and others. And I think, well, so please join us for that conversation. I think it will be very deep and profound in the way that we approach it. And it's line 3 is one of those climate issues that has become known around the world. It has a very high profile. And so there's a lot of interest from people around the world. Why did this get built? What were the reasons for it and against it? And how did that happen? And how can other countries try to prevent new fossil fuel infrastructure be built under those conditions? And I guess I would say at MCEA, at our organization, we were deeply involved in fighting the legal battles and very frustrated in how the government and political and legal processes panned out to work against all of the things that I think would be, you know, good for Minnesota's future. So you'll hear more about that tomorrow.
Okay. I think it's a great question. I'll take a quick stab at answering that. So I've been involved in fighting line 3 for many years. organizing legislators, supporting the work being done in the community and the work that Indigenous leaders have done. And this isn't over. This is still, there are still not only legal remedies that Senator Anderson talked about, but political ones as well. It's still well within the scope of the current administration to stop this, and we're going to be continuing to demand that. But there is this question about, building additional fossil fuel infrastructure, the equivalent of 50 coal-fired power plants, when we are facing this emergency and this crisis trying to get down to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So line 3 is a critical issue to continue to talk about. It's not over, but we also have to really use this as a discussion point about the role of fossil fuel infrastructure. I'll be talking a little about the role that the legislators have played and will continue to play in that issue.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I'm so sorry. There's other questions in the chat that we're not going to have time for today because we're coming up at our 9 o'clock deadline here. But if there are additional follow-up questions, you could reach out to me and I can try and get you in touch with our panelists today. But otherwise, thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you so much to our speakers. And everybody have a great day.
Thanks for sending
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Goodbye from Scotland.
Bye.